Hello everyone, it's Johnny Catrue, and today's video is about my first listen to the new Elbow album, Flying Dream 1. Elbow are an indie rock and pop group from England. They've been going for more than 30 years at this point. It's been 20 years since their debut album, and I've been a fan of them since 2005. In fact, Elbow are a very special band for me, having loved them for so many years, and it's been quite interesting to try to analyze and figure out exactly what are the things that I love so much about them. Their first album, Asleep in the Back, is probably my favorite of theirs, although they actually have at least two others that come close. Asleep in the Back has such a unique atmosphere. It's smoky and dark, kind of trip-hop influenced. It's often gentle and lush, but with explosions of noise. Diversity in their sound and the dynamics of their songwriting often seems informed by so much of the prog rock that I love. Guy Garvey's voice is often compared to that of Peter Gabriel, and the song structure of this beautiful track, Newborn, was said to be influenced by the structure of Entangled by Genesis. Over their next few albums, they continued to experiment with this quasi-progressive approach to indie rock, while also moving more and more towards more accessible songwriting ideas. This culminated in the release of their award-winning fourth album, The Seldom Seen Kid, which is a wonderful middle ground between the more ambitious work of their earlier albums and the more everyman approach to songs that would come to categorize their later albums. Since then, all their albums have continued to include at least something that impresses me and moves me, although they unfortunately usually also contain at least a few duds. For example, their 2014 album, The Takeoff and Landing of Everything, includes drabness like My Sad Captains, alongside the thrilling heavy jazz-inflected Flyboy Blue. Their drummer, Richard Jupp, unfortunately left the band in 2016, which led to the rhythmically stunted and kinda sappy album Little Fictions. But they somewhat recovered from this on their 2019 album, Giants of All Sizes, their most recent album, which found the band rediscovering a little bit of the darkness from their earliest and best albums. So this left me with relatively high hopes for this new Elbow album. The singles in the lead up to this release felt a little bit lightweight, but you really never know where an Elbow album might take you with its deeper cuts. So do me a favor and click the like button on this video, and let's get into the new album. The album opens with the title track, Flying Dream 1, which was released as a last-minute single just a couple days before the album. I hadn't heard it before listening to the album though, and it's a pretty understated way to open the album. The production sounds lovely though, and they apparently recorded this album in a theater instead of in a recording studio, and the effect is immediately apparent. There's something kind of strange about the backing vocals here, and anything unusual is very welcome at this point in Elbow's career where they have so many songs that kind of play it safe. However, the main melody, while quite pretty, feels kind of aimless in a way that some of the weaker material on their most recent albums also sound. By the end, the piano and lush arrangements take over though, and it's quite beautiful. So a pleasant, not bad start to the album. Track 2 is called After the Eclipse, and it introduces a very welcome classic mellotron flute sound with Guy Garvey's vocals soaring beautifully over the top. The main hook is not necessarily anything special to me, but the production and Guy Garvey's vocal performance make it work for me. There's a very welcome sudden change of key and atmosphere partway through, which sounds great. And the way it transitions back to the original sequence is also really nice and pretty sophisticated. That was fancy. The ending of the song repeats the chorus as a refrain, which was a bit underwhelming for me, but enough interesting things happened beforehand to leave me pretty happy with this song. The next one, track 3, is called Is It a Bird? And this one uses a drum machine in a similar way to that of Little Fictions, although interestingly they also incorporate some acoustic drums alongside it. The rhythm that this creates is really cool, and the whole song has this smoky, slightly jazzy atmosphere that Elbow do really well. It does kind of have that Little Fictions issue of feeling slightly flat and unexciting, but it does at least carry a great mood and manages to avoid triteness. The addition of some really nice sounding horns towards the end also really add to that smoky atmosphere. Track 4 was the second single put out for the album. It's called 6 Words. And while I was a little bit unimpressed with this song when I first heard it as a single, it has grown on me, mostly thanks again to the incredibly lush and varied production and arrangements. The melody is maybe a little too meandering for my liking. It doesn't really lock in with too many potent moments, although there is this one. I do appreciate the natural drums, the piano, and the general openness of the production, but the actual tune here is just okay for me. Track 5 brings with it another welcome change in atmosphere. The song's called Calm and Happy, and it's a relatively short one. But as soon as it begins with its tuned percussion or bells, alongside some double bass, the change in timbre is really refreshing. Unfortunately, the melody here just doesn't work for me at all. It's another one of these melodies that just feels very meandering and I just don't feel much from it. It's a shame because it feels like kind of a waste of a really wonderful mood. The ending has a nice bit of what sounds like some treated guitar of some kind. So despite the kind of weak tune, I really enjoyed this track just for its textures. Track 6 is called Come On Blue, and unfortunately this opens a section of the album that I feel really quite let down by. This song does at least have another unique atmosphere with ghostly strings hanging over everything. I really have to hand it to keyboardist and producer Craig Potter, who I really think is the MVP of this album. Sadly, the melody here is another disappointment for me. I just feel it meanders around without intention. Guy Garvey sings it really well, but the songwriting just isn't there. But if I was underwhelmed by Come On Blue, track 7, The Only Road, outright offended me with its blandness. This track is a return to the Little Fictions approach of a pretty lifeless electric drum pattern with a mind-numbingly dull tune on top.
Where I should be in my whole life.
That chorus melody is especially trite to me. I really can't stand it. And unlike some of the previous tracks, this one doesn't even have very interesting production to save it. This one is just a disappointment for me, I'm afraid. Track 8 is called Red Sky Radio, and thankfully the album kind of comes back to life a bit with this one. The more sweeping production of the first few tracks is back. Guy Garvey pushes his voice to the higher registers, and we can actually feel something again. That's more like it. We even get some more unexpected key changes, this time accompanied by some falsetto vocals that go over great. The melodies aren't anything spectacular, and the rhythm of the song is kind of plodding, but it has enough going on for me to feel back on board. Next up is the Seldom Seen Kid, the first single that they put out for this album that interestingly carries the same title as their celebrated 4th album. It refers to a friend of the band who sadly died in 2006, their 2008 album being dedicated to him and this song seemingly being another tribute. As with 6 Words, I was slightly underwhelmed by this one when it was first put out as a single, but this one has grown on me a lot, even more than 6 Words. The standout feature of this track for me being the slightly dissonant but beautiful string arrangements.
With rain and for ages.
The way the chords of the song are built on the strings piece by piece as the verse progresses is really beautiful, interesting, and moving. The song also has a really lovely drum part played with brushes, and the combination works really well. The vocal melody's not particularly catchy, which makes the song feel like a bit of a slow burner. But after hearing it a few times, it's really gotten under my skin, and hearing it appear at this point in the album was really satisfying. It sounds lovely over the more harmonically complex string part, and compared to some of the melodies in the previous songs, this one positively glows.
And you'd swirl in a chaos of charm.
I suppose I only wish the song built to a bit more of a climax, but as it is, it's understated but affecting. The last song, track 10, is called What Am I Without You, and thankfully this one picks up the energy to go out with a bit of a bang. There have been a few moments throughout this album where the chord changes remind me of 60s music like the Beach Boys and the Zombies in particular. This song actually goes all out and sounds even more influenced by those sounds in its production and keyboards.
Keep singing this song.
Sounds wonderful. The production gets really grand and the vocals soar beautifully on top of it all. I think it's one of the strongest songs on the album, and leaving it to the end really helps to leave a good taste in my mouth once the album finishes. After some shaky moments throughout the album, it's quite a relief that the album goes out on such a high note. And you know, on reflection, this album really runs the gamut of quality for me. The production sounds mostly fantastic, the decision to record in a theatre clearly paid off, and Craig Potter seems to have been really determined to make this album more sonically interesting than their last 2 or 3 albums, returning in some ways to the more atmospheric and layered sounds of their earliest and best albums. Unfortunately, some of the songs here just didn't quite live up to the wonderful mood set by these lovely sounds. Although I can confidently say I was more excited by the songwriting here than I was on the kind of flat and uninspired Little Fictions. There was some longing and beauty to be found here at least. Although it does kind of feel like a shame that none of the edge they rediscovered on Giants of All Sizes and songs like Dexter and Sinister found its way onto this album. They did seem to be aiming for a more romantic album this time around, and I can say that at times it worked. It really can't hold a candle to their earliest and best work though, and I have to say, if you haven't heard their first 4 albums from the 2000s, I really recommend you listen to those albums first. Even if this is a really nice album for fans that at least touches on some of the magic that we know they're capable of conjuring. So all the clips in this video of my first listen to this album are from my live stream over on Twitch. If you'd like to join me for some full album listening parties, you can follow me over there at twitch.tv/JohnnyCatrue. You can also join us on the Johnny Catrue Discord if you'd like to chat to me and our community about this music. If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting me with the link in the description to buy me a coffee. It really helps me to be able to keep making these videos and keep my channels going, so I really appreciate it. And thank you very much for watching. Until next time, take it easy.